Hi everyone, it's Neve here and welcome to the Scrap FX YouTube channel. Today we're going to be making a really simple card using the new February release of the Valentine's chipboard from Scrap FX. So I'm just starting off with this large Love Bingo card and I'm dipping it into white ink only because I couldn't find my Versa ink pad to ink it up. I've used an acrylic block just to push it in because it is so fine. I don't want to damage it by pushing it in with my fingers, and I find I get a much more even pressure if I use my acrylic block. So I've just put out some black embossing powder and I've tipped that over the top of my chipboard and I'm heating it up. I'm going to add a few layers to this just because I wanted to add some extra colours into the little hearts and onto the love at the top. So just having a little bit more embossing powder on here helps build up those layers. Because the little lines on the grid are so fine, you really don't need that much and don't need to worry if you miss out on any. You can see I had some little gaps in the hearts down the bottom. I've just sprinkled it in. So now I'm going in with some pink embossing powder. This is the Mixed Media pink embossing powder from Ranger Ink. It was released last year. I'm just sort of sprinkling over some of the hearts just for a little bit of interest, and over the love, or the U, sorry, which is in that little square, which I end up changing in the end. Once I finish with the pink, I'm going to go back in again with some gold and just sprinkle it over where the love is. I realise it's quite hard to see sort of on this view of the video, without sort of closing in, but it gives you a sort of an idea. You can sort of see that gold colour coming up now. I find if you've got a black base for sprinkling in different colours, you get a much bigger contrast with what you're doing, so it sort of sticks out a bit more. I really loved having the gold on there, and I decided that the hearts need a little bit of gold, and I decided I wanted to marble the hearts. So what I've done is I'm just using the point of my craft knife, and while the embossing powder is still molten, I'm just dragging my craft knife through it just to marble it up a little bit. If you find it sort of gets a bit gluggy, all you need to do is reheat your embossing powder and go back to liquid form. You'll also find you'll get a tiny little bit of embossing powder on the end of your craft knife, but it will release as soon as it's dry, so don't need to worry about that you're ruining your craft knife in any way, shape or form. Now I'm just going around the edges of my craft knife, and just be really careful when you're doing this. I'm used to using my craft knife, but I should really be cutting away from myself instead towards myself. I'm just trimming off any extra embossing powder that gone over the edges. It just makes it look a little bit lumpy. When it's such a fine image, you really don't need to do that. I'm also going in with a black alcohol marker or a permanent marker to cover over some of those lines again. The reason for that was some of the sprinkling, when I was sprinkling on, got into it. I didn't particularly like it. I wanted to have the black lines, so I just decided to use my marker to go over that. Now all I'm doing is cutting off a strip of the red paper because I knew I wanted to sort of divide this up and make the love you a real focus in this little bingo card. So I'm just using my knife to cut off a small strip that I know is going to stick on here, and I will use some glue to stick it down. Now the glue I'm using to stick this down is from Gina K. It's called a Connect glue. I haven't found it in Australia, unfortunately, and if anyone knows where to get it in Australia, I would love to know, because it's amazing glue. It's gluing anything down, and it's got a really fine tip on it which hasn't yet clogged up. It dries really, really quickly, and it also dries clear. So particularly for a really fine piece of chipboard, I've been finding it's just the perfect glue to glue everything down. So once I've glued it down, I could trim off any excess I had on here. And again, I'm just using the craft knife to cut off so the little red piece fits exactly on the back of those little squares. Now you could be really clever with this. It's such a fantastic little chipboard image. You could actually do a real patchwork quilt go on this, and just with scraps of scrapbooking paper that you've got, just put those behind. I chose to block out those two words so they really had a focus, and then put it on quite a busy background. The papers that I'm using are from Basic Grey, And they're from a very old collection, and Basic Grey doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but I was a huge fan of their papers, and I've still got huge stacks of them, so I really am working my way through trying to get them all used up. So I'm just going around and cutting a border for my card. And the reason I chose this, I think it was one of their sort of graffiti type papers, and it just has some really cool mark making in the background. And then I'm mounting it back onto the red card that I had cut the small strip off, just to have a bit of a border and tie the pieces together. I'm also sticking this onto craft card as my final piece. This is a really simple card. It didn't take me that long to put together at all, and it is really effective. I like the fact that it's not super girly as well. A lot of the sort of Valentine stuff that you get can be really uber pretty, but this is a really good one that you could use for any situation. It doesn't necessarily have to be for Valentine's Day, but it'd be lovely for a thinking of you card as well, in just whatever way you did that. There's nothing to stop you just painting over the whole image as well, and gluing it onto a patterned background. It would look beautiful. If you're into doing artist trading cards, this is the perfect size for that as well. So it would be a really interesting little artist trading card that you could do, or for the front cover of a mini book, and you could have all the reasons inside why you love the person that you're sending your mini book to. So I decided I just didn't want a full-size card, and I cut it down. So this is a close-up where you can see the marbling on my image. I was really happy with how this card turned out, and I hope you give it a go. It's such an easy card to do. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye for now.